In this lecture, I want to update you on some really cool new stuff that's come out in ARKit 2. Apple announced this at WWDC 2018, and while the fundamentals that you've learned up to this point are still the same, still there, Apple has just added on some extra things that make ARKit that much better, and the biggest amongst those is the ability to save your 3D augmented reality world and be able to come back to it at a later point in time. The awesome demo of this was the kid, playing with the Legos, right? He's got this whole setup world and he's got this ARKit and he's doing stuff, and the mom says, "Oh, it's dinner time, right?" And you've got to put your phone down, and maybe by the time you put your phone down and you've come back, whatever, like your app has exited out, you got to come back and sort of rebuild your virtual world, right? And that could be extremely annoying. So in ARKit 2, Apple makes it extremely simple to make it so you can save your world. So much so, in fact, I'm going to show you how to take our last app that we just created, the Measure Fun app, and add this ability there. It's really simple. It's just a matter of being able to save the world, which they call a map, and then be able to restore that back. We're going to be using user defaults to be able to store that. Nothing fancy like saving it inside of core data or a file or anything like that. So let's go ahead and open that project back up. Okay. And I'm going to make sure that I open this with the latest Xcode 10. One thing that you do want to note here is that when the other videos were previously recorded, it was with iOS 11. This is going to be using ARKit 2 and iOS 12, so you want to make sure that you have 12.0 selected here for your deployment target. Go ahead and select your project, then go to 12.0 there. Okay. To make sure that everything's okay, go ahead and do a build. We're going to want to make sure that everything is up to snuff here, and you'll notice we'll actually have one slight change here. The name of this has changed, so we'll go make that fix really quick. But with that in place, let's talk about how it is that we can save our little world that we've created, right? And we're essentially putting two dots on the screen, and we can check and see where there's whether those dots are this far apart, that far, whatever. And the first thing that I want to do is implement the functionality to say when it is that we can save a world, because ARKit has to have enough information. The world has to be mapped out enough in order for that to happen. So what we're going to have to do is scroll up to the very top of our class. I'll give ourselves some space to work with here. And what we need to do is specify here that we are going to be an AR session delegate. Okay, so AR session delegate. One, we have to say that we're going to conform to that protocol, and then also here inside of our view did load, when we set the scene view.delegate, we're also going to go say, let's tap into our scene view.session and set its delegate also equal to ourselves. Okay, so now that we have that delegate all in place, this means we're going to be able to add a cool new function here that basically tells us when we're ready to save a world. And the whole reason that we want to know whether or not we can save a world is in this new app that we're creating. We don't want our users to be able to add anything until the map is properly all added here. So just go ahead and start typing out did update. Okay, and we're going to be wanting to do the did update frame, so make sure you've got that session did update frame, and this is where we basically want to check and see where the map is currently at. So it gives us back this frame object, and on that frame, that's where we can tap into it and see what the map situation is. So I'm just going to do a little if statement. I'm going to say if frame dot, and then we want to get to its world mapping status. Okay, if you're not seeing this, make sure you're using the latest Xcode 10 and that you've specified that this app runs iOS 12. Okay, so if frame.world mapping status is equal to, you can see a lot of different options here. So the first one, not available, means that nothing is ready. It means it's just not ready to go. Limited means, okay, I've got some. Extended is like I'm getting there. But mapped means I'm ready to rock and roll. Things are good. So we only want to move forward if things are in a mapped status. So we're going to go ahead and have this be one situation, and then we're going to have an else situation where we're any one of those other three options. So if this is currently mapped, we're going to take our one button here, the button that we use to be able to add things, and we're going to say that this is enabled. So we're going to say the button dot is enabled, and we're going to set that equal to true. And you can probably guess if it's any one of those other situations, we're going to have that be false. Now, this isn't the greatest user experience, right? If the user opens the app and sees that that button is disabled, they're going to be like, why can't I tap that? And, you know, hopefully they move the screen around enough to find that. But you could probably provide some better information to the user in using those other options, right? Saying, okay, like you're getting there. We need to see more of the floor around you in order for this to work, right? But for now, we're going to keep it very simple. Just only allow the button to be tapped if their world is properly mapped. Okay, so now that we have this in place, the next thing that we need to do is talk about how we can save this map. And we're going to have to make a new function to do this. So this is just a function that we're calling. There's nothing special about the name. I'm going to call this save map. And it's basically, we want to save the map anytime someone hits the button. So if we go ahead and, you know, the button tapped here, there's all sorts of stuff about adding a box here, adding a box there. After all of this, this is where we want to call our save map. All right. So here inside of save map, what we're going to do is basically go grab the current map that we have going on. And again, this should be working because we've only allowed the user to hit the button if the mapping status is equal to mapped. But to go ahead and grab this information, we're going to take our scene view and we're going to say scene view dot session. Then we're going to say get current world map, and you can see it's got a little completion handler here. So just go ahead and hit enter on that. This is going to pass us back a map. It's also going to pass us back an error. Okay. The code that then is going to go inside of here is first, let's make sure there's no errors. There shouldn't be any, but you know, you only want to move forward if that's not the case. So we're going to say if error is not equal to nil. Okay, so assuming that that's all right, then what we're going to do is unwrap the map, and we'll just do an if let here where we're going to use the exact same name to just quickly go ahead and unwrap that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to have to turn the map object into something that we can actually save into user defaults, which is going to be data. And we can do that using NSKeyed archiver. This is a great way to take, you know, other classes and bring them into a data format to be able to save them. So what we're going to do is NSKeyed archiver. Don't do unarchiver. That's what we're going to use in a second here. But NSKeyed archiver dot archive data. All right, archived data. And as far as the root object goes, this is going to be the map that we just unwrapped. And then requiring secure coding, yes, we're going to put true into there. What this is going to do is it's going to spit back some data to this, but because it throws, we have to put a little try optional there. But let's go ahead and just do an if let. We're going to say if let map data be equal to this. We'll go ahead and do our little curly brackets there. Now you can see our map data is a solid data object. It's not an optional, and it's ready to be put into our user defaults. So at this point, let's go take our user defaults dot standard dot, and then we're going to set in this map data that we have. So we're going to say map data. And as far as the key that's going to go inside of there, just go ahead and pick whatever name that you'd like. I'm going to simply say map. It's really simple and easy to use. I think that's a good way to designate that. We need to make sure that this is all saved in. So we're going to do user defaults.standard.save, or excuse me, synchronize. Basically the fancy way to say save with user defaults. And now with this in place, anytime someone taps the button, which again, they can only tap the button here if the mapping status is mapped, we are going to call this save map and get this, you know, whatever the map is currently like. If there's nothing there, if there's, you know, the 2 dots there, 1 dot, whatever it is, we're going to have this saved into user defaults. Okay, so now the next question becomes, all right, how can we go ahead and pull out this information? Like when the app opens up another time, right? Like the kid left for dinner, right? Came back, his app had closed out and he opens back up again. How can we bring back those dots? Well, what we can do is scroll down here. We're going to come to our view will appear. Remember, this is where we get our configuration all set up, plane detection, blah, 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 all that stuff. We're going to keep everything that we have here, but in between where we have the configuration object created and before we run this into the session, we are going to do a little check to see if we can't find something in user defaults that holds our map. And so what we're going to say is we're going to grab out of user defaults dot standard. We want to get some data. And the key for this is, again, is just our lowercase map that we had saved it in there with. Now with this, this is going to give us back an optional, so we want to be able to unwrap that. So we're going to say if let map be equal to all this, and we'll do our cool little curly bracket. Now the next step for us is we want to be able to take this data object that we have, right? This object called data or called map, which is data, and we want to bring it back into an actual map that we can add into our configuration. So we're going to have to do this through the nskeyed unarchiver. So nskeyed unarchiver. Then we're going to do dot unarchived object of class. Okay, make sure it's the singular class and not the one that has multiple. The one that we're looking for here is the AR world map, and just do dot self to represent that class. Make sure you don't have the parentheses on that, just dot self simply like that. And then for the from, you guessed it, we're going to pass in that map data there. So I'm noticing here we're going to get a little bit weird with the naming. If I keep this as map, I'm going to call this map data. This sort of helps us realize that this is a data object. I'll have to update this to say data. With this keyed archiver, this throws, so we're going to have to put a little try question mark, and let's just do an if let to save this. I'm going to say if let map be equal to this, and we'll do our cool little curly brackets there. If this all works out, we should have a map object, which is an AR world map optional. You might be thinking, well, that's not a good thing. Well, it's actually just fine, because this configuration that we have right here, on this, we can say configuration dot initial world map, and you can see it's looking for an AR world map optional. So we can just simply go ahead and pass in the map here. You could, technically unwrap it, but it's going to do, if it's nil, it'll just be nil anyways, and it won't cause you any issues. So essentially what we've done here is we've said, okay, when the app first opens up, we are going to check into user default, see if we can't grab anything out of the map. If there's something there, we're going to attempt to unarchive it, turn it back into an AR world map. If it is there, we're going to pass it into the configuration, and this will actually bring it back. Assuming that the user is in the same location and ARKit can detect that, it's going to show up those little dots that we've created on the screen. How cool is that? This is literally all that we have to do. There's no magic about, okay, rerun through everything. We're going to have to manually add these dots back into the app, right? Like create these box and all that stuff. No. This is everything that you have to do right here. I love how simple Apple has made this. If we go ahead and build this, you can see that we have no issues. So feel free to play around with this and see how this works for yourself. But that's all that we needed to do to implement this awesome new functionality with ARKit 2. I hope you enjoyed it.